around the nation, right here at TYT Nation. Jeff Waller here with you. Welcome to the show. It's Friday, TGIF. So we got a great show for you guys today. It is a lot of stuff. We got some Giuliani. Turns out a little bit of trouble. We've got Donald Trump on his tax returns. The Democrats' efforts to get those tax returns. Have they been successful? Will they be successful? We'll talk about it. Interesting stuff. Then we have Rand Paul on The View. I don't think I want to give too much away on that one. Then, of course, we'll go into a couple of stories that we wanted to do throughout the week. And that is the death of one of the witnesses in the Amber Geiger trial, the Botham Jean story. Really, really important. Really, really shady stuff going on. So I want to share that with you guys because I think it's really important. Then, of course, getting to the Blizzard boycott. So that should be fun. Okay, so we got a lot of good stuff for you guys today. But first, before I get into it, I want to thank you guys for watching. Please share the stream if you haven't already. Like and share the stream, definitely. Okay, so before I get into it, please. Okay, well, let me just backtrack that. I want to thank some patrons, patreon.com/TYTNation. We have Angelina Fernandez, Barrett Keller, Ben Buckley, Brian White, and Carrie Hawkins. So those are $3 members. Thank you so much for helping out. Patreon.com/TYTNation. Of course, we need your help more than ever with YouTube. So again, the YouTube situation, it's not just us, but we have a lot of channels that have reported a gigantic drop in new views. So these are videos that are just uploaded, right? They appear to have gotten around a 50 to 80% drop in viewership. So, I mean, that's really, really bad. So this is either a gigantic bug on the part of YouTube. And of course, they never admit like, oh, this is a bug, this is something wrong. But look, if you, as someone who's been on YouTube for a great many years now, since about 2013, I know for a fact that YouTube loves to screw around with things and then break things and then not admit when they've broken something. So I think that's the situation that we're going through right now. And so shit be broken. All right. And basically, need you guys to help us ride through it. So please share. Please become a patron, channel member. There are key bounties as well. All that stuff helps the show. All right. That said, let's dive into the news. Okay. So recently, two business associates of Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, were arrested as they were attempting to flee the country. They literally had one-way tickets to Vienna trying to get out of the country. And this, by the way, happened right after they met up with Rudy Giuliani. So now these two gentlemen, Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman, have been indicted on campaign finance charges, a bevy of different charges related to, of course, giving money, even under false names. So that's interesting. And, of course, so they're in a little bit of trouble, right? So the question here is, Giuliani, how much should he know, and what was he a part of? Was he a part of any of this? So now, according to the New York Times, Giuliani was a very close associate and had even received thousands of dollars in retainer fees from these two gentlemen. Now, last year, Giuliani started working for a company that Parnas had founded with Fruman. Now, associates of Mr. Parnas said he told them that he paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for what Mr. Giuliani said on Thursday was, quote, business and legal advice. So Giuliani has this interview. He says, well, I guess I work for them, but I was just giving advice. I didn't have anything to do with anything. I just gave them business and legal advice. Okay. So now, the company that Giuliani was contracted for, you're going to love this. The name of the company. It's called Fraud Guarantee. Fraud Guarantee. So, what is going on here? Fraud Guarantee. So, okay. So now we have this company called Fraud Guarantee that Giuliani is basically working for. Okay. So now I'm not sure I would have went in that direction. That's a terrible direction to go. But I look, was corruption or us taken? I mean, it's fairly obvious, right? I know. They supposedly deal with and mitigate fraud. That's why they're called Fraud Guarantee. That's still kind of a strange name. But okay, whatever, right? Very, very unfortunate naming, especially in hindsight. So now Giuliani is retained for by this company for legal advice, right? But at the same time, Parnas and Fruman, while also paying Giuliani for that supposed legal advice, which I don't think is legal advice at all. Let's be honest, we've seen this before. It's the same thing with Michael Cohen being retained to give advice to Trump. No, these guys were his fixers, Giuliani's fixers. That's what this is. But anyway, so now, and this is why I call them the fixers, by the way. It's because they were assisting Giuliani in investigations in Ukraine on behalf of President Donald Trump. So now, here's how that went, right? So Mr. Giuliani, according to the New York Times, dispatched Mr. Parnas and Fruman to Kiev, the Ukrainian capital, where despite fending off creditors at home because these two are incredibly inept businessmen, so they ended up having a lot of personal and business debt from their different ventures, right? So now, despite that, they went to Kiev, ran up gigantic charges at a strip club and the Hilton International Hotel. Already, I'm starting to think that they're not the brightest bulbs in the pack. But okay, all right. So now their mission, there explains the Times, was to find people and information that could be used to undermine the special counsel's investigation. Now that's of course the Mueller investigation, also related with CrowdStrike, and so they're doing their best to try to undermine that investigation that found 10 different counts of obstruction of justice on the part of Donald Trump, and likely would have been more. So, okay. So now, they weren't only just looking at that, of course. And by the way, that's one of the things that President Trump was trying to pressure Zelensky, the Prime Minister of Ukraine, the President of Ukraine, to do for him. Now, the other thing was look into his political rivals, Joe Biden. Yeah. So now, that's okay. So that's what they're doing, right? We know Giuliani was doing that, and we know these two were assisting Giuliani as well. Now, over the past year, the two men connected Mr. Giuliani with Ukrainians because they are, of course, Soviet-born. So they're from that area, who were willing to participate in efforts to push a largely unsubstantiated narrative about the Bidens, of course, your corruption, right? So now, okay. So the two met regularly with Mr. Giuliani, often at the Trump International Hotel in Washington. Now, they also played a key role in the campaign by pro-Trump forces to press for the removal of a United States ambassador to Ukraine on the grounds that she had not shown sufficient loyalty to the president as he pursued his agenda in Ukraine. And again, that agenda includes digging up dirt on the Bidens, as well as Elizabeth Warren. So she's also mentioned here, right? Oh, but no, this only has to do with corruption in Ukraine. Oh, there's so much Ukrainian corruption. In fact, but there's no Ukrainians mentioned in this so-called corruption. And by the way, it is corruption. There is corruption when it comes to the Bidens, but it is unfortunately systemic corruption and not personal corruption, which is what, of course, Donald Trump and Giuliani are employing, right? So now, okay. So now, while they were working with Giuliani, these two idiot bonehead businessmen, right? And I can say that because they're not smart. I know Donald Trump surrounds himself with the best people, the greatest people. Now he surrounds himself with criminals, often inept criminals. So that's what's going on here. But anyway, so now they set up two different companies. One was the fraud guarantee company, right? Which, again, hilarious. But also global energy producers. And that's a natural gas company, right? And so now their plan was to not only help out Donald Trump, but also to enrich themselves, as, of course, criminals like to do. Okay, so now that second company is basically an attempt to sell liquefied natural gas to Ukraine. And that same company, by the way, was also used to funnel large amounts of money to Donald Trump's presidential campaign. Because, of course, right? So now uh, they gave, what, $325,000 to one of the super PACs supporting President Trump, but also gave significant sums of money to Republican congressmen, including Kevin McCarthy and Pete Sessions, which are, by the way, not named in the indictment. So now, here's what's funny about that, right? So now, you know that Republicans kind of refuse to acknowledge that people give campaign contributions because they want something in return. Oh, perish the thought. How dare you make that insinuation that we're bribing politicians? All we're doing, we're just talking to them. Money is speech, so we're just we're just talking. We're having a conversation here. Complete and utter horse crap. Absurd argument on its face, especially when you look at what happened in this situation. It turns out that these two gentlemen had some success in their lobbying efforts. This legalized corruption, this legalized bribery called campaign contributions. According to the indictment, after making substantial campaign donations to Pete Sessions, Mr. Parnas asked him for help last year in pressing the Trump administration to remove the United States ambassador to Ukraine, Mary L. Yovanovitch. That's a tough one. Okay. So, all right. So, Mr. Sessions had wrote a letter to the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, criticizing Ms. Yovanovitch and seek to have her dismissed. Oh, no, the money had nothing to do with that. No, of course not. No, Pete Sessions, I mean, she just was not a fan of our Ukraine ambassador. No, you see that? You give a politician a boatload of money, and they do whatever you want. Oh, you want to get rid of an ambassador? Oh, you don't like this certain ambassador to the Ukraine? Or are they not getting along or being sufficiently loyal enough to Donald Trump? Okay, let me just write a letter saying that, yes, we should totally get rid of Miss Yanovovich. I probably said that name wrong. That's a tough one, man. So now, again, this ambassador not in favor of servicing Donald Trump. Now, Mr. Parnas had told associates that the ambassador was not open to his proposals related to the lucrative gas business in Ukraine, again, personal corruption, where Mr. Parnas pitched a natural gas deal to the chief executive of Naftogaz, as the New York Times reported last month. So again, that's part of the global energy company that they created in order to sell Ukraine liquefied natural gas. That is something, of course, that certain American businessmen or Ukrainian-born businessmen really want to do. Because right now, they get a lot of their energy from Russia. The West would really, really love to start selling them natural gas. And so that's what's going on here. So now, afterwards, Miss Yovanovitch had also come under fire from a Ukrainian prosecutor, Yuri Lutsenko. Now, Yuri Lutsenko just happened to be connected to Mr. Giuliani by Mr. Parnas and Mr. Fruman, and played a key role in Giuliani's efforts to promote investigations into Mr. Trump's rivals. It's all connected. They're all trying to push out this ambassador for not being loyal enough and not doing what the administration wants them to do. And what people who are friends of the administration want them to do, which is, of course, get lucrative natural gas deals to enrich themselves personally. So much in this corruption. All right, so now, while the indictment did not identify any officials by name, it is said that Mr. Parnas, in his efforts to oust Miss Yovanovitch, acted at least in part at the request of one or more Ukrainian government officials. Okay, so now we're getting into some actual Ukrainians involved in Ukrainian corruption. All right, so now we also know, because she testified earlier today, that Trump had pressured the State Department to fire her as well. So that tells me that Donald Trump knew what was going on, because Giuliani knew what was going on. And he said, hey, look, man, the ambassador is not playing ball with our friends, Mr. Parnas. And so, look, why don't we get rid of her and put someone in who's going to play ball, who's going to basically help out our common interests. Again, Donald Trump's more than happy to sell more natural gas to another country. And so that benefits, in his mind, that benefits America and benefits his friends as well. So he's, yeah, fire this person, terrible person. Let's get rid of her. Let's put someone in who will actually advance American interests. So, okay. Now, Giuliani was involved in giving legal advice as well to Mr. Parnas and Mr. Fruman in several instances, as they were helping Giuliani in his efforts to have Zelensky dig up dirt on the Bidens. He gave them advice when it came to their attempts to make natural gas deals, as well as other types of advice on how to defend themselves against certain charges. So now, when asked, and this is funny, when asked if Giuliani had indeed worked very closely with these two, there are a billion pictures around of them hanging out together. They were very, very close. And in fact, before they left, before they got arrested and tried to leave the country, they had met with Giuliani. He is very much tied in with them. But let's go to what he said in an interview on Thursday. He said, quote, I can't acknowledge it's fraud guarantee. I don't think. So that's when he was asked about the company that was retaining him. I don't know. It might be, I guess. I can acknowledge that I gave them substantial business advice, though, adding that one of his companies trains institutional customers in security work, including how to investigate crimes, from murder to terrorism to fraud. He said that most of its subdivisions of government, but every once in a while, it is a private enterprise. So he's being intentionally vague. So, look, it's funny how he doesn't quite remember what was going on, despite being paid thousands of dollars and being really close to these individuals. Again, these are people that were helping him investigate Joe Biden. So, come on. Nobody believes it when he says, I don't know, I really wasn't all too close to these guys. These are Giuliani's henchmen, business associates. This is who he ran with. Again, there's pictures of them, Trump Tower, numerous meetings, traveling to Ukraine together. He took money from them, advised them, and more importantly, worked together to do Donald Trump's bidding. That's what this is. So now, following this, some new news. Giuliani himself now appears to be under investigation for his role. So they're going to start demanding documents from him as well. So we'll see what happens if he decides to refuse to give over those documents. But all I can tell from right now is that it appears Giuliani seems to be in a little bit of trouble. And we'll have to see what kind of trouble. We'll have to see what the House, what the Democrats are able to do, if they'll actually force the issue. And we'll see how this all develops. Okay. Okay. So now, before I go to the next story, I want to apologize. The being late, my fault. So I actually did start the stream on time, but there was a setting that I didn't tick, and so you guys, sorry about that. 100% my fault that the show showed up late. So okay. Anyway, please forgive me. I didn't mean it. Okay. Anyway, so let's move on to the next story here. And that is more bad news for President Trump and his associates. All right. It appears that President Trump has suffered another defeat in the battle for his taxes. Now, earlier today, Trump lost a key court decision in a bid to block a subpoena from House Democrats who want to see his financial records. Okay, so now this was a 2-1 ruling in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, and basically comes from a case where Trump had sued to block Democrats from subpoenaing one of his accounting firms that would have relevant financial information. So, again, this is one of these investigations that's currently going on that is separate from the impeachment investigation. And so this is them looking into the emoluments clause. So now Democrats, again, want these records so they can see if Donald Trump has any sort of potential conflicts of interest, which we know probably he does. Very likely that he does. I would be surprised if he didn't. And had any improper payments from foreign governments. So, of course, that's all related to the emoluments clause, which, by the way, it's in the Constitution. You cannot take foreign emoluments, any sort of gifts, or contributions, or anything from foreign governments. It's very, very clear, and the whole purpose is, of course, to prevent corruption. Well, we've got plenty of corruption. It's in the White House right now. So now, Judge Patricia Millett of the D.C. Circuit Court, she said, quote, and I love this statement, contrary to the president's arguments, the committee possesses authority under both House rules and the Constitution to issue a subpoena. And so, actually, I'm sorry, that's Judge David Tattle wrote in a joint opinion by Judge Patricia Millett. So let's be clear about that. Again, this is a 2-1 ruling where, again, the appeals court says, look, you've got the authority. The House has the authority under these committees. Subpoena away. So now the thing that got him, President Trump, was mainly, look, there were a lot of years of precedent, right? A lot of different court cases. But the main one here was a Watergate-era precedent that said simply, strongly implies that presidents enjoy no blanket immunity from congressional subpoenas. Now, remember, the Trump administration's argument was, well, we should have blanket immunity, or else it gets in the way of me doing presidential stuff. So, I mean, if I'm being investigated, I can't actually do my job. Look, there's a certain sense to that. But remember, the administration argued for complete and total immunity from every sort of investigation, anything. So, could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, literally. Sorry, can't do an investigation, can't punish a president while he's sitting in office. The judge, obviously, these two judges on the appeals court had rejected that, and so had an earlier judge. So this is the president's first appeal. So now, again, we know that's an insane argument, but that's what the administration has been banking on to try to block and run out the clock. So now, there's a couple of things that Trump can still do, though. Unfortunately, it's not a lock yet. The president can either ask for a review by the entire DC circuit, which currently includes 11 active judges. So look at the breakdown, right? 7 of them were appointed by Democrats, and 4 were named by Republican presidents. So, so you end up having a court that is more Democrat than anyone else. So that tells me that he's going to go in a different direction if he decides to appeal this, and that would be the Supreme Court. I think he'd prefer the court because Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. So he probably thinks, and this is how, from what I get, this is how Trump thinks, right? So I put them in the court. They owe me. I put Kavanaugh, I put Gorsuch on the court. I got them through. They owe me because I gave them their jobs. Whether or not that turns out to be correct, well, I mean, that they see it that way. Well, that'll be a different thing. Okay. And again, I don't know. The century of precedent is very, very clear. The president is not above the law. And again, you would have to be deeply 100% corrupt. Now, I'm not saying that can't be the case when it comes to Kavanaugh or Gorsuch. But look, I think at some point, if they rule on behalf of Donald Trump, they're going to appear to be incredibly partisan. When you're on the court, you're supposed to at least have the appearance of not being incredibly partisan, of being, basically somebody who goes to the Constitution. And look, Gorsuch himself calls himself a constitutional originalist. And so I don't think that he would do this. I don't think that he'd be like, well, yeah, that's right, President. Above the law, nothing you can do. I just don't see that happen. Okay. But then again, I could be wrong. I just don't see a way that Donald Trump can actually win this. And again, it's clearly denoted in the Constitution that that these committees have the power to issue subpoenas, especially when it comes to relevant investigations. But as usual, we're going to have to see how this unfolds. We're going to have to see how the House Democrats react, as well as Donald Trump, and see where this goes from here. Should be very interesting. Okay. So, interesting, right? All right. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a quick break, allow for more people to get in here. Again, my fault for putting up the stream a little bit late. You guys can always go back and watch the beginning, as well as, of course, watch the clips from that. But again, my fault. I apologize. All right. So what we're going to do, take a break, read some comments. We'll come back. We got the rest of the show for you guys, including Rand Paul getting laughed at. It's fun. All right. Stay right here. Run the Nation. Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, TOT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Okay, so we got some comments here that I definitely am going to read. First, let's go to Sarge Tech. Member says, the fish rots from the head down. Basically, yeah. Uh, and then some non-member comments, which I found were pretty interesting. Ruth Sheridan asks, why are the cops required to take a leave of absence from work while being investigated? The president can stay in office and destroy evidence, start wars, and commit more crimes than high treason. That's a good question. And look, let me give a sort of a realistic answer to that. I think the point is to prevent political investigations because, look, we all know the right would launch every single political investigation they could to stop a president from actually doing anything or even attempting to govern. So I think it's just designed that way to prevent abuse. Even so, there's abuse going on. And so, unfortunately, that's what we have in President Trump, somebody who does not care about the norms, does not care about any sort of like law. Basically, again, the guy feels like he's above the law, and so that's why we do got to get him out. Chris War says, "I need a background soon. It looks so different without it." I know, man. I'm working on it, brother. So I've had some really like mixed reactions on the no background thing. For some people, it's like, oh, thank God, you look like you're in a dungeon. Now you have something that's a little bit lighter. Okay, well, all right. The dungeon thing, that's interesting. Jeff reporting from the dungeon. Okay. Anyway, I'm gonna stop there before I get myself into trouble. And then there are some people that are like, it just doesn't look the same. I got you. I'm gonna work on something. Maybe I'll have something next week or over the weekend. I'm not sure what I'm going to do quite yet. But trust me, I'm thinking. I got some thoughts. Okay. Anyway, and finally, Pedro Sura points out that no articles of impeachment have been drafted yet. That's true. We're in an impeachment inquiry, and so what's interesting, right, is that the Trump administration right now is saying. I think it was a story a couple of days ago. We didn't get a chance to cover it, but they're basically saying, well, you didn't actually take a vote to do an impeachment inquiry, so that means we don't have to follow any sort of subpoenas. We don't have to listen to the committees. We don't have to do anything until you do that. Well, now wait a minute. What's the difference? Again, if you take a vote to do impeachment in the House, and then you do it at the beginning, and then you also have to take a vote to do impeachment at the end. So what does it matter if you take the first vote? It's all optics. It's all semantics. It's all BS. But it's BS the Trump administration is using to try to stall out and basically not go along with what they're required to do and give over these documents. And so now the other thing is, and it's really frustrating, is Nancy Pelosi refuses to hold that vote. I know, like I said, it's a symbolic vote. We shouldn't really need to do it. But hey, if that's the game that the Republicans are going to play, okay, why don't we just do that? Hold a vote, whatever. Make it official, I guess. Well, Nancy Pelosi refuses to do that. Why is that? It's the goddamn corporate Democrats. You got those red state Democrats, the conservative ones, that they're worried about. Oh my God, what is this going to do? I mean, if we actually have official impeachment, then I mean, you can't back out of that. And what if that hurts our electoral chances? God damn it, Nancy Pelosi, do your job. She is absolutely terrible at it. And so that's frustrating. Deeply so. Okay. Anyway, thank you for your comments. I will actually do some Q bounties at the end of today's show, and so we'll save that to the end. Very interesting stuff. Very good questions. You want to ask me a question? QBounty.com. That's QBounti.com. Sign up. Ask me a question. I will do a video response, and it helps the show. Okay. Anyway. Let's go to our next story. Let's go to Rand Paul.
Well, the IRS statistics say that the top 1% in our country pay 40% of the income tax, and that those making less than $50,000.
Donald Trump doesn't pay any income tax.
So that was Rand Paul getting laughed at by the audience of The View for basically claiming that, well, I mean, rich people, they pay more taxes, and that's why they've got it hard. That's why we can't raise taxes and have quote unquote free stuff. So, okay. Now, here's the thing. He says the 1% pays about 40% of all the taxes, right? So, you know what? Actually, the rich actually pay a lot less. Before I get into that, of course, I want to give you the rest of the context of the conversation. It started out with Rand Paul basically arguing that, hey, look, our tax system is different, and that's why you guys can't have nice things like Medicare for all and free college. Take a look.
But we have massive taxes here, but we don't get any free stuff. We don't have free health care. Well, our public education system is a problem. It seems like the only people that get free stuff are the very, very wealthy.
No, we have a different form of taxation in our country. Ours is much more progressive. So we've taken the poor off of the rolls. They don't pay income tax anymore. Most people below $50,000 don't pay any income tax. The top 1% in our country pay 40%.
Our audience says that's not true.
Well, the IRS statistics say that the top 1% in our country pay 40% of the income tax, and that those making less than $50,000.
Donald Trump doesn't pay any income tax.
Damn. Okay, so no, the point is we pay taxes, but those taxes are not going to things that actually help us. So no, look, I feel a little shafted, right? Like, again, a lot of us do pay taxes, and we actually would like to have decent health care and decent education and things like that. So now, Rand Paul says, hey, look, you know, if you make under $50,000, you don't pay taxes at all. But you know what? That's not exactly accurate. You still end up paying state and local taxes. Those are actually more regressive. And now the federal tax code, by the way, at the top, according to a study, has actually become regressive as well, thanks to the spate of tax cuts, the most recent, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, or the Donald Trump tax cuts. So now, according to a book, Triumph of Injustice, by economists Emmanuel Saez and Gabriel Zuckman from the University of California, Berkeley, in 2018, the average effective tax rate paid for by the 400 richest families in the country was not 40%, it was 23%. Not 40, like he says, oh, the rich people pay 40% of all the taxes, right? And they pay incredibly high rates, and they pay more taxes than the middle class. No, the effective tax rate, 23%. So they're actually paying less in taxes, even though they do pay taxes, right? So now that's a full percentage point. That is lower than the 24.2% rate paid by the bottom half of American households. So, yes, they are paying more of the taxes, but they're paying less as well. So now, the richest families in the country, again, they pay less than I do. That's garbage. The audience knows that it's garbage. So, and look, here's the thing. You know what? Back in the 1980s, the 400 richest Americans actually had an effective tax rate of about 47%. In 1960, the rate was as high as 56%. So what we've done since the 1970s and 80s, especially since the 80s, since Ronald Reagan, was slash the effective tax rate for the rich and corporations. So now, essentially cut in half, while the effective tax rate paid for by the bottom 50% has barely changed at all. And so, now what's interesting about this study, of course, and why, of course, Rand Paul is misleading, is because this analysis includes not just federal income taxes, which, again, the rich do pay a majority of, let's be honest, because They have pretty much most of the money, but also corporate taxes, as well as taxes paid at the state and local levels. So you combine them all together, and you end up having working class people paying a higher effective tax rate than the rich. Now, something that this also includes is indirect taxes, right? It's about $250 billion worth every year. And indirect taxes are basically government fees, right? For example, licenses for vehicles in businesses. Those taxes and fees, like you all know, they've increased over time for us. Why? It's because the states are getting less federal money. And a lot of states have also cut taxes on the rich and corporations. And so they've had to make up that money by cutting services, reducing spending, and also increasing fees and taxes on regular working people. But see, no, they know this, right? Rand Paul knows this. Everyone knows this. But Rand Paul serves donors. The donors want to pay as little in taxes as they can. So he says, yeah, but the rich pay 40% of all the income taxes, and so we pay so much out of our income, which is actually not true. Again, as a percentage of their income, they actually pay less than working people, as I've shown you. Um, no, they don't care. Poor us, poor rich people. Why don't you think of the rich people? You should be thankful that we pay anything at all. I mean, poor us, right? Well, if he had his way, they wouldn't. And so here's the thing: we need to have a fair tax system. Obviously, if you make more, you should end up paying more as a percentage of your income. That's the whole point of a progressive tax system, is to say that the people at the top who have benefited the most from society should get back a larger percentage in order to make sure that we have basic services, as well as being able to make sure that other people have the opportunity to also make it big and give back to their country. That used to be how America worked. This isn't a new idea. This isn't some crazy European socialism. No. We did it here in America. We perfected it. We had, at a time in this country, productivity and wages rising at the same level. We had a vibrant middle class, higher taxes on wealthy people, which, by the way, wealthy people were still incredibly wealthy, even during that time when they had tax rates. And I'm not saying the effective tax rate, but a marginal tax rate of over 90%. Rich people, still rich, but we actually had a middle class. Now, it's the opposite. We have most of the money that's flowed to the top that now benefits only the wealthiest Americans. The middle class has shrunk. It is deeply in debt. That's the only reason that we have a middle class now, is because they've had to take out so much debt to keep up that lifestyle. And so the system has gotten way too top heavy, and we need a course correction. I believe a wealth tax is a great place to start. Elizabeth Warren has a good wealth tax. Bernie Sanders has an even better, more aggressive wealth tax that targets people like Jeff Bezos, who, by the way, Amazon did not pay taxes last year, and yet Amazon CEO is one of the wealthiest, no, is the wealthiest man alive. There is no reason that we should have so many billionaires worth that much money. A billionaire is a policy failure. That's why we need a wealth tax. That's why we need progressive taxation to bring this back in line. If it doesn't, I can't really see what's going to happen, but I know it ain't going to be good. Okay. So let's go to the disastrous story here. And that's what happened to Joshua Brown. All right. So we have some new details in the death of Joshua Brown. Now, Brown, of course, was one of the key witnesses in the case against Amber Geiger, who was found guilty of murder for killing Botham Jean. So now, Brown was shot and killed last week, not long after he served as a witness for the prosecution in that murder trial. So it's a very high-profile murder trial. One of the first police officers to go to prison for shooting an unarmed black man. So now Geiger, like I said, went into Botham Jean's apartment and shot him. And oh no, she said that it was a mistake. I thought it was my apartment. I thought he was coming at me. It turns out, no. According to Brown's testimony, there was some argument. And I think argument's the wrong word. Basically, he heard, hey, what are you doing in here? Essentially, well, he couldn't really make out what they were saying. But it sounded like Botham Jean was very, very, very surprised to see Amber in his apartment. And of course, we all know why. Okay, so now, remember, this guy, he is a victim, right? Joshua Brown. Now, according to Dallas PD, Brown, they allege, was killed in a drug deal. Okay, now wait a minute here. Now, Brown was gunned down in the parking lot of his apartment complex as he exited his car. So that's what we know right now, right? So now, according to the police officer report from Dallas PD, the three men allegedly involved reportedly drove about 300 miles and over 4 hours from Alexandria, Louisiana to Dallas to buy marijuana from Josh Brown. Wait a minute. Wait. Okay. So now, I'm going to explain why that doesn't make sense. But already, now, according to the police, the drug deal had gone bad, turned into a physical altercation, which led to one of the three men being shot by Brown. So Brown allegedly pulled out a gun, shot one of the three men. Brown was shot in retaliation, and now the story gets really, really odd. Now, the men allegedly grabbed the gun Brown used to shoot their friend and his backpack, but not the money, not the drugs, and then escaped. So now, then they dropped their friend off at a hospital, and then they're gone. They disappeared. Okay. Now, the man who was in police custody after he was hospitalized reportedly told police what happened. And so the police, they went and searched this guy's apartment, Josh Brown's apartment. Now, after the search, they reportedly found 12 pounds of marijuana, of 149 grams of THC vape cartridges, and $4,000 in cash. So now, that does not make sense. Why would somebody, for one, cross state lines and drive 300 miles for weed from a guy who was just caught up in a very public trial of a police officer? That does not make sense. And it also doesn't make sense that Brown would, since he's hot, right? Since he's well known now as being a star key witness against a police officer that killed an unarmed black man, he would decide to go and have a good idea to sell drugs. No, dude, that doesn't make any sense. Now, some people are buying it, and I mean the story, not the alleged weed. But I don't understand. I don't understand who would buy it. Other than, I guess people who have this certain caricature, this certain thing in mind when they think about black people. So now there's more questions, right? So now, why didn't they take the drugs that they came up to buy? Why leave the drugs? Why was it still conveniently in his apartment when the deal was allegedly taking place in the parking lot? Why would you do a drug deal in the parking lot and not actually have the drugs? Why not take the guy's money? Oh, okay, maybe it's because one of their guys got shot and they had to go. And then, but for some reason, the guy who was shot is again supposedly shot in the chest, right? And then spills everything to the police about Brown. That doesn't make any sense. And look, also, again, if you were a drug dealer, wouldn't somebody have found that out? Either the defense or the prosecution? I mean, again, he's a witness for the prosecution. Wouldn't the defense try to vet that witness to try to discredit them before or during the trial? Why now after the trial? Again, nothing makes sense other than possible character assassination. I know it seems crazy, but look, think about it. He helped to get a cop put away for 10 years, right? And so like, okay, so police tend to protect their own. We know that, right? And so, look, the cops tried to protect her. They obviously didn't fail, or I'm sorry, they obviously did not succeed. They failed at this, and so she ends up getting put away, despite police trying to make a case for her. Oh, she was tired. She had worked an extended shift. She, coming up with all sorts of excuses, right? And so I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. You don't think that some people would be angry that they were able to put away a policewoman for 10 years? No. What about the guy who, Geiger was sexting and calling right before she shot Botham Jean? What about that guy? You think he might be a little angry at this? I don't know. The whole story really, really stinks. And you know what's worse is that this might be used to call in the results of the trial. Because, oh no, now we know. They're going to say now we know that the one of these key witnesses was a shady drug dealer who got himself killed. For some people, I think it calls into question the entire case. Oh, I knew those black people. They're up to no good. Maybe Botham was a violent drug dealer too. You don't know. You don't know. The witness was. And it also possibly sets up Geiger for a retrial. I know that sounds crazy, and I don't know if that's actually going to happen, but could it? I don't know. This sure seems like a smear job to me on someone who's dead. And how many times have they done that? How many times have they taken a dead man, tested him for drugs or her for drugs, and it's, oh look, we found marijuana in their system. I guess they must be a bad person. I guess they must have earned it. They must have deserved it. Or look, you can't trust their testimony because they're bad people. I don't know, man. This makes me wonder if this isn't planned out. There isn't some sort of conspiracy going on here. And I know I hate doing this, and I hate coming up with conspiracies. But man, this story does not add up whatsoever. Their defense adds up to it just doesn't add up. And there needs to be some answers, some real answers. And I just don't know if we're going to be able to get them. Okay. Jesus, am I already almost out of time? Holy crap. Okay. So I'm going to I'm going to go to the Q Bounty questions, and then we'll kind of finish up the show. All right. So there's some great questions here, by the way. So now it's time to answer some audience questions from Q Bounty. So I'm going to start out here with Anonymous, who asks me, is it possible that progressive commentators like myself are being sabotaged by big corporations like YouTube? And then goes on to say that this would be a subtle way to promote establishment candidates and establishment news media. Oh, no, look, that's kind of a good question, right? So is it possible that we're being sabotaged by corporations? Yeah, it's possible. Absolutely. So now, here's the thing. I think advertisers have the most sway on YouTube. And so this is behind Adpocalypse and all the changes that, of course, deplatform certain people and elevate other more safe sources. We already know that YouTube prioritizes establishment media. Why? Because they are considered to be safe. Now, there's of course, the crackdowns on the people like Alex Jones, and I understand that the conspiracy content and hard right wing stuff that's hateful and violent. I get that, right? I get that. So now I think some people have said, hey, look, all this stuff, this independent media, especially from the left, you can't trust that. Right and left, you can't trust any of that. And so, because that's where the bad actors are, you don't want your ads being shown on a channel of a bad actor, right? So, no, we can't have that. So now we're going to put our ads mainly on safe channels, and we're going to mark safe channels for you. And those safe channels are, of course, MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, New York Times, basically all of your establishment media. And that's who the advertisers feel the most comfortable with. And that's who YouTube feels the most comfortable with. And so there is that business interest. Again, it's not quite about like, hey, let's shut down all independent media. It's more of like, hey, we have our trusted sources, the ones that we know are safe, that are not going to upset our advertisers. So we're going to stick with them. We're going to prioritize them. That way, of course, the advertisers will continue to make money. They won't freak out, because one of the big things here is that, and this is the whole thing that started the adpocalypse in the first place, was some ads being run on like ISIS channels, right? So extremist content. So advertisers are incredibly conservative, not like politically conservative, but they're scared. They're scared of essentially everything. And so if they see one of their ads, or it gets reported that one of their ads is on a hateful channel, then they'll remove all their ads and they'll say, we'll just go back to legacy media. And now, of course, legacy media loves that, because they're like, yes, please come back and put all your money in television instead of on the digital ad space. And so they, get scared. They pull back. YouTube responds to it by basically saying, well, what we're going to do is we're going to designate certain channels safe. And those are, of course, establishment corporate media. So those ones are safe. Everyone else is not safe. They get deprioritized. They get deplatformed, and they, of course, get demonetized. And we don't care about them. We actually care more about the safe media. That way we don't get in trouble by the media. We don't get in trouble by our advertisers, and we continue to make money. And we don't get called into hearings in Congress. And so that's the three different reasons why we're in the mess that we're in. And so I don't think it's them sitting in smoke-filled rooms saying, let's sabotage TYT Nation or the Young Turks or Humanist Report or any of those channels. But I'm saying it's just a definite, like an unfortunate response to advertisers being easily spooked. And so that's what I think about that. Okay. One more question here, also coming from Anonymous. And this is about Elizabeth Warren. So now they ask, why is the establishment so sure that Elizabeth Warren is not for Medicare for all? And there's an accompanying video, of course, of someone on an MSNBC panel saying, Elizabeth Warren is not for Medicare for all. She will waffle on it. And this person asks, what do they know that we don't? Do you think Warren will go back in her general pledge to not take corporate money also? She is already allowing the party to still do it. So now that's interesting, right? So there are two different questions in here. Is Elizabeth Warren not for Medicare for all? I think that she will bend. I don't think that she's 100%. I think maybe she'll be like, yeah, I'll try to fight for it because, it's popular, but I will leave myself open to other things. Now, I don't like that position because I accept no middle ground. So, but I think that right now, she's like, yes, I'll fight for Medicare for all. But if I can't do it, I'm going to make sure I have other options available. Basically, she's being a politician, right? I do think that she believes it personally, that it's the best course, but I also think that she'll waffle on it and say, well, at least we can have some sort of progress. We can have something, even if it keeps private insurance. And that'll be a win for the American people. And then, and I don't know if the corporate media knows anything that we don't specifically. I'm not entirely sure. Um, so only we can only guess on that. As far as going back in her pledge to take corporate money in the general, I think as long as she continues to get donations, like if she becomes the Democratic nominee, it's very likely, very possible that she will get enough money from individual donations. Again, and the reason that I say that is because right now she is actually raising a pretty decent amount of money from just individual donations and not corporate donations, right? So that's good. Her and Bernie Sanders, of course, is raising the most. And there are people that I think that if Bernie Sanders does not win the nomination, will go to pledge Elizabeth Warren. And so I think I don't know how much of a percentage of those people there are, but I think there's a fairly decent amount. And as long as she gets enough money, I think Elizabeth Warren and continues to get that money, then she will not take corporate money. Because what we've seen from candidates that have already pledged to not take corporate money and then go back on it, it's because they weren't getting enough to run their campaigns. So campaign it is expensive. I understand that, we all do, but nonetheless, we don't think that you should take corporate money anyway. And so Bernie Sanders, like I said, he's been getting the most individual donations from regular people. Elizabeth Warren following, and so I think as long as she continues to get those independent donations, she will not go for corporate money. However, you do bring up a good point that she's already still allowing the party to raise money, so she's raising money on behalf of Democrats from corporate donors. It's a big red flag. I don't like that at all. And of course, we know that you raise money for the DNC recycles that back into your campaign. So that could be a backhand way, if you're a cynical person, for her to actually raise money from corporations and knowing that it's going to flow partly back into her campaign anyway. And so, that doesn't look good if that's the case. And so that's why, of course, I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter, because he takes no corporate PAC money, raises no corporate money for the establishment candidates. And so that's who I can trust 100% to represent our interests. All right. So hopefully that was clear. All right. So thank you, guys, for sending those questions. Qbonnie.com. That's how you can ask me a question, which goes to help the show. QBOUNTI.com. There will be a link in the description. All right, guys. Thank you. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. You guys have a great weekend. We'll see you later.